Welcome to episode 161 of the Half Point Per Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie, and my producer, Johnny Pham. You can follow us Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. All social medias. Don't worry, Dalton. We won't make a blue sky yet. I know that would really stress you out to have another platform to worry about. So we'll just keep it to those. For right now, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing excellent. Things are going swimmingly. The NFL world moving right along.
Yeah.
We're like 12 weeks out from me being seasonally depressed when the NFL season's almost over.
That's great. Something to look forward to.
So yes, something to look forward to bigly. But I'm excited. We got another week of NFL action this Sunday. And hopefully, I don't know if you guys saw it, but there was a lot of discourse on the Twitter sphere, X, some are calling it.
I've actually mostly been on Blue Sky today, so I haven't seen that.
Interesting. Never DM me on that platform. And folks are saying Red Zone could have ruined the NFL product. So that was interesting.
You know, it's funny. I saw there was like one tweet going around that I'm assuming you're referencing just about how the NFL product sucks now. I think it was Robert Mays, like, guys, Bengals Ravens happened like 3 days ago. That was like an unbelievably fun and amazing game that Johnny and I were both sweating out the same bet till the very end, which tragically lost, but it was still fun nonetheless. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. I do have some thoughts on a couple different things to get off my chest to start this show. But Johnny, first, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Yeah, my wife left me.
Oh yeah.
To go to Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's there for a few days. So just been here at the apartment.
You're positive she didn't just move back?
Can't confirm. She brought a suitcase with her. That's all I have knowledge wise. But it's kind of crazy that Bengals Ravens game was a few days ago, and that was just an electric factory. And I forgot we had that bet. It feels so long ago, but it wasn't.
Yeah, Bengals or Ravens -2.5 and Derrick Henry touchdown. Thanks, Zach Taylor, for deciding to go for 2 and making the smart choice for once. You idiot. Mm-hmm. Way to be smart for once.
Idiot.
Asshole. Okay, real quick before I get my 2 things here, Dalton. Any swim updates that we need to be aware of this week? Anything? Well, we're all done. Wow,
finished last Thursday. So Dobby's a free elf. Dobby can swim, and we may do another set of swim.
So did you have to pass like a swim test?
No, there's no swim test.
Wow.
I will tell you by the end. I was just swimming laps, and there was an instructor present.
That sounds like a swim test.
But
Johnny, did you ever have to do the swim test, the big pool, when you were a kid?
Johnny doesn't know how to swim.
Never made it that far.
But in order to go into the deep end at the big pool in Garden State, Dalton, you had to, at least when it first opened with the new water slides, you had to do a swim test. And it was just, you swam across the entire pool, which very biggest swimming pool like in the world, right? At the time, you had to swim across the entire pool while a lifeguard just walked beside you.
No, I never went down the slide, so I never had to take the test. I mean, I went to the deep end side and just hung by the edges, but never had to take a test.
You didn't have to take the test to go in the deep end?
No.
That makes no sense. The deep end was like 8 feet deep. The slide area was like 3.5 feet deep when you stood. That makes zero sense. Okay. Anyway.
Correct.
But before we get too far off topic there, a couple things. Number one, I know I've had this rant before. It's funny. It's actually a basketball thing that kind of brought me back to this, but I can bring it back to football too. I am so tired of these injury doctors on Twitter, man. I am so sick and tired of it. People who follow basketball may know Chet Holmgren had a very strange injury, all kinds of early diagnosis on that based on the fall. Turns out it was an injury that literally nobody has ever heard of or had, basically. So can't tell what's happening on a replay, folks. In football, the week before that, we had Patrick Mahomes have the kind of scary non-contact injury. You know, internally, it's okay to wonder, oh my God, was that an Achilles, like AC, like that was non-contact? What was that? if you have a big following, whether you're an injury doctor or a fantasy analyst, maybe don't tweet Achilles ? Like maybe don't do that. I saw multiple tweets like can we just not, you can't tell what happened on a replay. The injury doctors are valuable when you want any insight on what a timeline for certain injuries might be, what a return to play timeline might be. Please stop listening to them try and diagnose these injuries in real time. It is completely pointless and one of the most annoying things on Twitter to me right now.
Well, I don't know if you've seen or heard of this, but there's like a list of football/fantasy accounts I've blocklisted. One of them is Jesse Morris, MD.
Yeah, he's one of the ones.
He's a terrible person. He DMs people terrible things.
Is he the one that got in the argument with Christian Watson's dad about what Christian Watson's injury was?
Yes. So
that was funny. It's like, how was I supposed to know it was his dad? Hey, man, maybe this was the lesson for you. You can't actually tell what's happening based on the replay.
Yeah, it sums up a lot of like injury Twitter where they're like, oh, the team said they have this. Here's the return timeline we've seen with 30 players.
Yeah.
Helpful.
Yes.
A video of Dak running and zooming in on his cheeks and telling me you see a peripheral strain on his left butt cheek that he probably tore his hamstring. That's not helpful. I'll tell you that right now.
Cake watch, not helpful.
Yeah, Thursday night was cake watch big time. Love to see the injury doctors going on Derrick Henry.
Oh, that was so funny. My second thing, Dalton, I know you will have a lot of thoughts on this one. Just like, what are the Colts? Why are the Colts? How are the Colts? Like, we bench Anthony Richardson. We get predictably 2 or 3, however many weeks it was, horrific performances out of Joe Flacco. The only good thing about it is all the jokes people made every time he threw a pick. Well, this is a really valuable lesson that he can learn and really, use it to improve down the road as our franchise quarter. Oh, wait, he's 40? Okay, never mind. That's the only thing I'll miss about the Joe Flacco era. Anthony Richardson is now, again, the starting quarterback. I think November 11th, Shane Steichen said that it was still Joe Flacco. No games have been played between then and now, if you're keeping track at home, by the Indianapolis Colts. So, just not a lot of organizational synergy, not a great environment for a young quarterback trying to develop. Not sure it's going to be a great environment for fantasy football down the stretch the rest of the way. But it's just a very frustrating thing that has happened in Indianapolis this year.
Yeah, I think to fully understand what is going on, we start the year 1596 when Rene Descartes discovered the study of epistemology and what we are. We must first ask, who are the Colts? And the answer is a dumpster fire. And the conclusion of that dumpster fire is that
Would that be what are the Colts?
No, they are in fact a dumpster fire. You would refer to them as dumpster fire if you were talking about them in any other sense. And the fact that Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson have the same number of starts and almost the exact same stats says a lot about where Joe Flacco, a retread at this point, is in his career, and where the exciting young quarterback who can throw a piss missile 81 yards down the field on one foot. Maybe you start the guy who has some upside.
It also says a lot about Kevin Stefanski. Neither here nor there. We all saw what Joe Flacco did in Cleveland last year. Yeah, was it this week? I'm losing track of my Colts drama. Was it this week where Shane Steichen was pretty much asked, "Hey, why don't you throw the same short stuff with Richardson as Flacco?" And he pretty much gave an answer that was a non-answer. And it's like, okay, man, like I get you don't want to tell us that, and I guess that's fine. But just given all the dysfunction and all the incorrect decisions, I think so far, I would be very curious to know why don't you dial up some 3-yard passes for your very inaccurate quarterback to throw sometimes.
They have like a 20% screen percentage with Joe Flacco, and it's like a 4% with Anthony Richardson. And on a screen, there's one read.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not him ignoring a progression in that instance.
It's nothing but there's a completely different offensive philosophy with Anthony Richardson, which probably is a good thing in a lot of ways. But maybe we give him the Joe Flacco offense and just see what happens.
Yeah, we just give him at least some layups. I saw Matt Harmon kind of joke about, because someone's like, this is, RIP Josh Downs with this news, which I think maybe. Matt Harmon joked, like, what are you talking about? He had his best game with Anthony Richardson this year. No further context needed. That's because he had the one completely broken coverage 70-yard touchdown. So
Yes.
might be tough sledding ahead for Josh Downs. It's been tough sledding for Michael Pittman. Probably Jonathan Taylor's the only guy that you can confidently start right now.
Yes. Maybe go pick up Anthony Richardson. See what happens. Have some fun.
On that note, let's have some fun, Dalton. Let's get into
before
the
we
action.
jump in. I wanted to play a little quiz game with you two.
Okay. This better be good because that was a really good transition you said.
It was.
For, so let's hear
it. just like Shane Steichen, we can't make up our minds over here at tell me who these two players are. One of them has 44 targets for 31 receptions, 367 yards, and a touchdown. The other one has 44 targets, 33 receptions, 347 yards, and 1 touchdown. Give you 2 hints. They play on the same team, and they're in the AFC East.
This feels like a real that meme where it's like the HR meme where like one guy doing the same thing is good and one guy doing the thing that's bad is so this feels like one is. This feels like one where it's like very positive for one guy, very negative for the other. AFC East.
I'll give you one more hint. One player was drafted in the 2nd round. One probably went undrafted in any redraft league.
Oh, in fantasy. 2nd round. AFC East. 2nd round. Bills. Oh, it's Garrett Wilson and...
No, they only have 347 receiving yards apiece.
Oh. You know what? I mean, I still don't know if Garrett Wilson has that many more than that. He probably does, but...
the answer, if you've given up.
Hold up. Is it on the Jets, though? Am I on the right team?
No.
Because I was about to go Devontae Adams and somebody with my next one.
You got to go south.
South in the AFC East. I mean, Miami, is it Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle?
So close. It's one of those players.
Oh, I saw this tweet today, actually. God, I'm so mad. It's Jalen Waddle and Jonnu Smith. I was actually going to bring this up, too.
Yes. It just gives key insights into how little we know about the NFL every season and how frustrating the NFL season, because these are not the same caliber of player in any regards.
No, absolutely not. Okay. On to the trade deadline special. We've got 3 players apiece, or 6 players apiece, 3 to trade for, 3 to trade away. Dalton, give me your first guy that you are trading for ahead of fantasy football trade deadlines.
Yeah, this one I think is pretty cut and dry because I think he's a hit, and I think the owners are pretty upset with him right now because he's injured. And it's Mike Evans. So as far as the Mike Evans experience goes, the Buccaneers have the best rest of season schedule when it comes to opposing passing defenses. The Bucs have no other weapons. Cade Otton is demanding the team high in target share since Mike Evans has been out, because obviously Chris Godwin went down with a season-ending injury. And Mike Evans has gotten a full 5 weeks to recover from a bad hamstring injury, and he's coming out of a bye. In that time span, Baker Mayfield has still ranked 4th in the NFL in big-time throw rate, 2nd in the NFL in on-target percentage, and the Buccaneers are leading the NFL in play-action success rate. So with a very depleted receiving core, Baker Mayfield has still shown that he can be like a starting caliber quarterback, and Mike Evans really is 1-to-1 when it comes to what he can provide this receiving core. He now has the option to work in the slot, even because they don't have a dedicated slot player. Since taking over a full-time starting role, I am much saddened to report Jalen McMillan has been terrible. Among 54 qualifying players who have at least 75 snaps in the slot, Jalen McMillan ranks dead last. That is beat out by guys like Wan'Dale Robinson. So it's not a good list to be on. Since he's been put into a full-time role, Jalen McMillan has not really been good. So Mike Evans will probably and likely move around this offense at all 3 levels. And Liam Cohen has shown a tendency to do that. Mike Evans has played a career low as an X-receiver this year in his starting snaps. That's because he's played flanker and he's played slot on different play formations. And I just really think Mike Evans coming back, barring another setback to his hamstring, could be a very exciting player for a team that is now competing for the playoffs, because 2 things are happening. The Mike Evans team is likely not winning games or struggling to win games, and you should be in a position where you can trade for him, you can lose a few and still make your playoffs, or you're making the playoffs and you can sell somebody like a package deal of Kareem Hunt and who's a wide receiver who's been good lately that we don't think will stay good.
I mean, what do you think of Cortland Sutton?
Or there you go. A Kareem Hunt, a Cortland Sutton package is something you could probably sell the Mike Evans owner who has him either planted on IR.
Josh Downs.
Josh Downs. Yes. So I think he's probably my prime trade target if I'm a fantasy owner right now, because he should be at a heavily discounted price because he hasn't played. We haven't seen him on the action field for a while. In spite of all of that, this Buccaneers offense is still humming, and that brings me a lot of excitement about what they'll do when they bring him back in, because he should be the most heavily involved option.
When's the Bucs bye week? It doesn't
week
look like
11.
Week. Okay, so probably after the bye week, then
that's what he's expected back.
He's back. Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about Mike Evans with a trade question last week. I think obviously anytime you can get a team that has the Carolina Panthers, is it twice still? They haven't played the Panthers yet.
Yes.
That is good business. If you're just talking about price, like he's the wide receiver 31 right now, obviously has missed 3 games. Also, the previous 2 games before that, he's been in single digits. So whoever has Mike Evans has not had the Mike Evans like positive experience for over a month now. So that, and like you said, if that team is losing games, yeah, he is definitely somebody to take a look at. My next guy, I'll start with the one that I know we have overlap on, Dalton, and that is Ramondre Stevenson. And, you know, him and somebody else I'm going to bring up in a minute. This kind of feels like an old habits die hard list for me. Like I'm naming guys that I think are good players who just for whatever, either in the case of somewhat Stevenson, more so the other guy, haven't performed near what you drafted them at, or Stevenson, who like has been not that much worse than probably where you drafted them at, but I think there's upside for him to be a lot better down the stretch. He was obviously banged up and missed some time earlier in the season, but in the last 3 games since he got healthy, he's played about 75% of the team snaps and is averaging about 20 opportunities per game. And probably most importantly for him right now, he's kind of taken over the third down role from Antonio Gibson. So this is from Fantasy Life. Stevenson has run nearly 5 times the amount of routes as Gibson in the last 3 weeks. And obviously, just look at last week, 21 touches, 77 yards. Previous week, he caught a touchdown. I think he has 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. Like, I understand it's the Patriots offense. He is still averaging probably something like 3 yards a carry over the last 3 weeks. It's probably not going to get a ton better in that regard down the stretch. I will just say it is not his fault. It is the offensive line's fault. He's still a very good player. He just doesn't have a lot of room to run. But they are at least moving the ball up and down the field right now. Drake May is actually getting them in the red zone, getting them those red zone opportunities. Obviously, that was not happening with Jacoby Brissett. And he is, of course, their goal line guy, their short yardage guy, so he's going to eat in those situations too. Like, he's the RB21 in rest of season ranks on Fantasy Pros. He's behind guys like Tyrone Tracy, who I would definitely take him over, behind Chuba Hubbard, which I think that one's questionable, but I think I'm taking Stevenson over Chuba Hubbard, which, by the way, I saw a line in an article today that said Chuba was in the past an interesting buy low, but he obviously just had a huge game, or interesting sell high, excuse me. And he just had a monster game. Brooks is coming back. Oh, but now Chuba got the contract. So now I think Chuba is the RB1 on the team the rest of the season because he got the contract, which that could be right. But
you know who the highest paid running back on that roster is?
Yeah, Miles Sanders. So it's like, yeah, please don't base it just on the contract. Like, use your eyes. He's been, if you thought he was the RB1, if you think he's RB1 now, you should have thought he was the RB1 2 weeks ago because he's been playing that well the whole season. We'll see what happens with Brooks. Obviously, he was a healthy scratch, but he just came back. Like, we'll see how that split goes. So I don't really know what to do with Chuba right now. I would definitely take Ramondre, I think, over him rest of season, though. And like Chase Brown, another guy who is ahead of him. So I just think that his price is kind of in that sweet spot, low end RB2 right now, where he just feels like more of a sure thing workload wise and just skill wise than a lot of those guys in that spot. I mean, I don't have the stats after this last week, but before last week, he was in the top 10 in broken tackles forced per run. By the way, James Conner was number 1 by like 10. He was way ahead of everybody else. But Ramondre, good player. Opportunity is improving in the backfield. Offense is improving. I think he's a buy.
Yeah. And like you said, we both agreed on this one. We both had him as a buy. Like you said, I agree. It's really important that the Antonio Gibson work has really disappeared. I mean, there was a point 5 weeks ago where Antonio Gibson was deemed the starting running back in this offense, and he's no longer the starting running back. He's not even getting snaps. The Drake May experience has been up and down, but Drake May's been better than a lot of people thought.
Yeah.
And more importantly, just he's revitalized this offense where there are red zone scoring opportunities. Since taking over, the Patriots rank 18th in red zone scoring opportunities, which I know doesn't sound great, but with Jacoby Brissett, they were 32nd.
I was going to say, compared to where they were.
So it's a marked improvement, and the ability for Drake May to keep plays alive. You saw that in the overtime where he threw it to Ramondre Stevenson after surviving in the pocket for what felt like 15 seconds.
I think it was like literally 11 seconds.
Yeah. And that's just a major boon to this offense because I don't think the offense is well structured, but Drake May's ability to keep plays alive, move the ball around, it's doing a good job, and his legs are becoming a bigger threat, which I think teams are going to have to start honoring, which is going to give Ramondre some better looks when he gets his rush attempts. And even then, over the last 4 weeks, Ramondre Stevenson is 4th among all running backs in carries. So they're giving him the work. The work is there. He's on the field for basically every play at this point. It's hard to turn down that volume when you're going to get some good weeks out of that. They're going to have a game where they get a couple of weird red zone, picks, or they get some red zone opportunities you wouldn't have expected, and Ramondre becomes the beneficiary of it.
Yeah, I mean, he has 2 top 10 finishes in 4 games with May. Again, obviously, the touchdowns have helped, but he has got to at least be set up for those opportunities, which he really was not too much before Drake May became the starter. Okay, Dalton, real quickly, before we get in your next one, on the topic of Chuba Hubbard and Devontae Smith for Saquon Barkley. I'm doing that 100 times out of 100 if I'm the Saquon side of that.
Yeah, so am I, especially because Saquon's already passed us by. So is Devontae, obviously. Hubbard is not.
He's on his bye this week. Chuba's on his bye this week.
He's on his bye this week. So you're just getting a ton of value, and Barkley has like league winner potential. Devontae Smith, fine, played really well. He's had double digit like every week. Hubbard, you think you know what you're getting every week. I still feel like that train could stop at some point. Be a little worried about that. But Barkley, it's a sit it, don't think about it every week, or a start it, don't think about it every week.
Yeah. Okay, next up for you.
Next up for me after Ramondre was my last one. A little deeper cut, probably not available in most leagues. I looked up at CBS, and he's available in 22% of leagues. But it's Juwan Jennings. So Juwan Jennings last week had a dominant performance. He had 93 yards on 5 targets. That doesn't sound great. However, the coach speak coming out of it, we were affirmed that he's going to play X the rest of the season.
Yep, and that was his first time ever basically playing in that role.
Yes. So on the year, Juwan Jennings has the highest scoring points of any wide receiver. Currently, he had a 50-point game. And it's inflating his margins a bit. But when he plays over 80% of the snaps, which is only 4 games so far this season, Juwan Jennings among active wide receivers ranks 8th in yards per route run, 12th in targets per route run, and is generating 2.3 yards per separation on routes lined up in the X. That's from the fantasy data. So he has been really good in the role. Kyle Shanahan, among all of his misgivings that I have a ton of, does a really good job at scheming players up, and Juwan Jennings seems to be the beneficiary of it without Ayuk. And then Deebo Samuel really has not played well this season at all. I've expected a turnaround that we haven't seen, and this offense looks a little better with Christian McCaffrey in it. So I would be going after.
By the way, Christian McCaffrey just straight into Christian McCaffrey workload last week.
Yes,
of course,
straight in. Jordan Mason, RIP.
Yep, he did good, buddy.
It's just, I think you can get him cheaper than the value he's going to give your team because there's not a lot of name value associated with him. He's probably been on and off waivers in your league. The moment Deebo and Ayuk were back, Jennings was probably benched after his 50-point week and probably dropped the following week. And going forward, this is a team that's going to need to compete. And with Juwan Jennings in the X position, I think him being there is a really profitable experience for fantasy players.
Yeah, so I wonder, I'm looking at just points right now this year. Khalil Shakir is 25, Jennings is 30. I wonder how close those two are in value if you were doing a trade right now. I think I'd rather have Jennings. I wonder if you could get Jennings for Shakir, or you'd have to add something else to it.
Yeah, if you could do Jennings for Shakir, I'd be pretty excited about that in a redraft league.
Yeah. Two more questions here. Trade Drake London for Debo, who we just talked about, and trade Tank Dell for Devonta Smith. We'll start London for Debo. I am on the London side of that, unless I'm assuming. I know he got hurt last week. He's not missing significant time, right? Like I didn't miss that somewhere.
No, it's just a hip pointer.
Yeah. I'm on the London side of that one for sure.
I'm on the London side as well.
Tank Dell for Devonta Smith. I think I was pretty positive on Tank Dell, and I still we need to see Nico Collins come back for Tank Dell to really be actualized, probably. But I prefer Devonta Smith's outlook the rest of the way, I think.
Yeah, I'm doing Devonta Smith as well. The Texans passing offense, it's still questionable to me.
Yeah,
like if it's going to turn things around this season. It's been pretty poor in a lot of games.
Yep. Okay, my second one. This is the guy this is a real shot in the dark, just taking a player I've always loved. That's Jaylen Warren. I mean, he has had a nightmare season from a fantasy perspective if you drafted him. Obviously, he got hurt, missed time, so you didn't have to worry about him there for a little bit, but he wasn't usable before that. Hasn't really been usable after that, but we've seen a little bit of life these last couple of games, and especially this last week. We've seen a little bit of life since Russell Wilson took over and Warren got healthy, and then this last week post-bye was his most involved game yet, I would say. He was 1 yard away from a pretty big day. He fumbled on the 1 yard line. It was not a fumble that's really going to put you in the doghouse. It was a scrum. I mean, obviously you don't want to do it, but it's not like a soft fumble, and he's not a fumbler, so not worried about that long term. In fact, I think Gene Steratore said on the broadcast that the play should have been called dead, so he probably just got kind of screwed a little bit on that play, but he could have had 16 points and probably not easy to trade for at this point. With that said, 10 points last week, or I think it was 8 points actually last week for Jaylen Warren. I typed Jaylen Waddle in this actually by accident at first, and was like, oh, no, don't want to trade for Jaylen Waddle. The thing about Warren, his utilization, has gone up and up and up since Russ came back. 14, 11, and 16 touches in these last 3 games. He just played a season high in snaps this last week. Those are his 3 highest touch games of the season. He's gotten multiple targets in all of those games. He's been right around that 40 to 50% of the snaps in all of those games, which is those are all what we saw out of him last year, where he was a top 20 running back down the last half of the season last year when that started happening. And, we ranked him coming into the season as a fringe RB2, kind of hoping that'd be the case. And he was banged up before the season even started, got hurt again early in the season. And I also think that he is a guy that benefits from a Russell Wilson offense as opposed to a Justin Fields offense, just stylistically. Never mind the fact that actually the offense, I think, has been better with Russell Wilson. So the better the offense, obviously more opportunities for the players. He still has 0 touchdowns this year. I know he's not going to be a big touchdown scorer, but that will surely change. And so I just think if you trade for him right now, you're probably getting a high-end RB3 flex type of guy. And, I mean, we know the deal. If something were to happen to Najee, this is probably a top 12 running back in a given week. And he just got very similar snap share to Najee for the first time last week. Najee had more touches, which that's totally fine. That's always been fine. It's just, Warren hasn't broken off the big run yet. He hasn't scored the touchdown yet. I think this is a guy who is going to be a startable player down the stretch, and that's been far from the case the first half of the year.
Yeah, I don't hate it. It's a shot in the dark. I was trying to find how rostered he is in redraft leagues. I couldn't because I feel like he might be available on waiver wires as well. The offense looks better under Russell Wilson and more competent. weird scheduling quirk. Did you know the Steelers haven't played a division game yet? Doesn't
Yeah.
matter for any of this.
Yeah.
But it's just weird that we're 10 weeks in almost and they haven't played a single divisional game. But I like it because this is still a run-first offense that relies on some deep cuts from Russell Wilson when needed. It's a competent enough offense that it made Washington's defense struggle. It obviously ended up winning that game. And Jaylen Warren has shown to be an explosive player. I think the injuries probably hampered him for the start of the season. But I can't hate it because you're likely going to a team that's not using him and getting him for cheap. And it's one of the high-end handcuffs. And we talk about this when we get later in the season. You want to go and you just want to load the back end of your roster with high-end outcome players who could end up being really successful for you. And that's exactly what he is.
Yep. The only thing that would keep Jaylen Warren from being an absolute league winner if Najee wasn't available down the stretch is the fact that the Chiefs play the Steelers on Christmas Day. Other than that, it'd be wheels up for Warren if
forgetting
Najee wasn't around.
One other factor.
Yeah, I know. Cordero Patterson is
Arthur
in fact
Smith,
still on
buddy.
the game. But
right.
I think this is a good player, and he is kind of finally found his footing, I guess, on the season. And I have kind of a similar take on a backfield later on, so we'll get to that later.
Who's your final trade for?
My final trade. Oh, yeah, you've got yours was Ramondre. My final trade for Trey McBride. So Trey McBride has 0 receiving touchdowns this year. He has 1 rushing touchdown on an end around, nice little play. He had a play last week that could have easily been a touchdown. Was kind of a jump ball situation. Just wasn't able to come down with it. Good defense, one of those sorts of plays in the red zone back shoulder throw. He had a play the week before where did you see this play, Dalton? The play action where McBride, I am not kidding you. There's nobody on the defense that is not on the line of scrimmage. McBride is completely by himself in the back of the end zone. It just takes Kyler too long to go through the play action, get around, get his feet set, probably actually be able to see over the line. And by that point, they're covering him enough to where Kyler airmails it out of the back of the end zone. McBride is literally screaming in frustration, and not at Kyler, just in general. And I think all of us probably were too. Like, that was an incredibly frustrating play. If I were to tell you if there was any tight end who was the tight end 3 in points per game and in total points with 1 total touchdown, you'd say, oh yeah, that guy is in for better days ahead down the stretch. And you couple that with the fact that this is just a really good player. I think, like, I don't know if I want to say he's the best tight end in the NFL. Obviously, like, Kelsey is still Kelsey, clearly. He just gets it done in a different way now. He's forced like 1 or 2 missed tackles on the season this year. Kittle, still amazing. But I think just from a pure athleticism standpoint, this might be the best athlete at the tight end position who is also a very good player in the NFL right now. Trey McBride is awesome. This offense runs through him. He's 3rd in target share at 26% at the position. He has 25% of his team's air yards, which is 2nd at the position behind Kelsey, who's like at 31% or something like that. They get the Panthers, I believe, week 16. They get the Rams in the championship matchup. The Panthers are the worst team in the NFL against tight ends. The Rams, bottom 10. So good schedule, great player, touchdown regression, like just all of the makings for a big boom down the stretch for Trey McBride.
Yeah, and this team is still in need of a wide receiver 1. One of the guys I didn't put him on my list I considered as a trade away was actually Marvin Harrison Jr.
He's a trade away. For me.
I won't spoil much more on that one from what I looked into it. He didn't make the list just because I think I had other guys that were over him. But this team is still kind of in need of an alpha for Kyler Murray. And Trey McBride's really been that between the 20s. And we just haven't got the touchdowns. When you have a fumble recovery and a rushing touchdown, it's insane that he hasn't got a passing touchdown.
I forgot about the fumble recovery.
And target shares among tight ends, I think Trey McBride is near the top. He
3rd.
He has been very good at getting open, and when he catches the ball, he's kind of a force. Like, he's not just a player that goes down. He's good at contested catches.
You see him jump over the guy like it was here last week or 2 weeks ago?
It was last week because I was playing against him. And I watched it happen. So, yes, Trey McBride, very good target to go for it. And now is the time to consolidate your roster, because now we know kind of who the elite tight ends are. This is why you don't draft elite tight end early in fantasy. Trey McBride ended up being a fine pick. 5 other guys did not. And this is where you can consolidate and pick those elite tight ends. Those Trey McBrides, George Kittles were out there and will be good for your roster.
Yeah, and he's on his bye, so that's always a situation where you can pluck him off a losing team that desperately needs a win this week, and you do not. So he is a guy that I think you can and should go out and get. All right, Dalton, your first trade away.
This one hurts a little bit because I've liked the player this season, and he surprised me, but I still think that the case for starting him weekly is shaky, and what he's surrounded by is shakier. And I'm going with Bucky Irving. So, despite being the better player than Rachaad White as a rusher, Rachaad White's still done great as a pass catcher. Bucky Irving is not supplanting the Rachaad White role. I regret to inform all of the week 3 tweets that Bucky Irving was here to stay. He's not really here to stay. He is and will continue to be a situational back in this offense that they use in and out between him and White for the most part.
It's so frustrating too. I understand he's small. I also understand he is banged up, probably will be for the whole season, it sounds like, because what I can't remember what the injury is that he's dealing with, a knee, I think. I understand you want to try and keep him as healthy as you can, but just when you watch him, it's very clear who is the better runner of the two. And they should be using Rachaad White as the pass catching guy with a couple of carries mixed in here and there, and then use Sean Tucker to spell Bucky Irving if you want in the back. That would be the better way to maximize your offense. But whatever.
Yes, but just last week alone, White played on almost 60% of the Bucs snaps. He had all the goal line carries, and he also had all of the 2-minute offensive snaps. It's very important because he is getting the third down and distance work. And this is a defense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that has been very bad, and it's been in catch-up mode for most of the season. And I don't suspect that to change no matter who they play. The defense ranks 31st in pass yards allowed and first in the NFL in fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks. It's a very bad defense, and they haven't made any moves to make it better. So Rachaad White's going to be on the field consistently because they're playing in their 2-minute offense as consistently as they need to. If Bucky's not getting the goal line work when they get down because they score a lot, he's also not going to be a player you can reliably start and hope for touchdowns in a high-scoring offense. You're going to need him to be special and get a big, long gain. This isn't like Jahmyr Gibbs, though, where Jahmyr Gibbs has that in him almost every play. Unfortunately, Bucky Irving's explosive rate is only 21st among qualified running backs out of a 52. So it's high, but it's not high enough. A guy I would really consider trading him for, who I think you can get for now, is Brian Robinson, who's missed the last 2 games. But when he plays, his role is really solidified in this offense. It's a really good offense, and it's an upgrade over Bucky in both goal line work and in efficiency on his carries. So I would go out there. I would be looking to deal Bucky Irving because it's going to be a headache for you. And when you get later in the season, you don't want headaches in your RB2 spot and your flex spot just to be the one to eat the 8-point outcome and lose on the 22-point outcome.
Yeah, that's one. So I thought about him, but it's painful either way. It's painful to trade him away. It's painful to keep him and decide if you want to start him or sit him for all the reasons that you said from start sit. Painful to trade away because we've seen it. We've seen how good he is. We've seen what he could do if given the opportunity. And just that little part of you thinks, man, if this backfield just shifts like it should, like I know it should down the stretch, I'm gonna be pissed off I traded that guy, because he's going to be good down the stretch. But I can see either side of the argument. I do think, obviously, Brian Robinson would be a great return. I think you probably have to add a little bit to get Robinson if he's back and playing this week, which it sounds like he probably will be. But yeah, love Bucky. I can see the case for trading him away. We have a question. Trade Chase Brown for James Cook or James Conner, or just hold on to Chase for now. I don't think I would do it for James Conner. I mean, if nothing else, Dalton, because what do we say about James Conner? He misses 4 games a year. We are in week 10, week 11 now. He's not missed any games. Bad logic, I know. Not saying it's going to happen. I would just be like, you have to decide, can I live with trading away this young running back in a good offense where the guy they just traded to bring in, Khalil Herbert, fumbled on his first carry, and they just went out and signed whatever, Who was it? Who was the guy from the Giants they signed?
I can't remember.
It's on the tip of my not a good running back. So it's the Chase Brown show. Long story short, right now, could you live with yourself if you traded away Chase Brown and then James Conner got hurt? I think my answer is probably no. However, James Cook, I think yes. I would rather have James Cook rest of season.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying here with the follow-up comments you were offering James Cook and Addison for Chase.
No, don't do that. Keep Chase. Keep Chase.
Yes.
Who's the number one receiver by a pretty wide margin right now because he just
no. Sorry, it's for Chase Brown.
Oh, for Chase Brown.
Yeah, and I would do that. I would take both
James
Cook and Jordan Addison.
James Cook for Jordan Addison for Chase. Oh, and Addison for Chase. Yeah, I would do it. I would do Cook straight up for Chase Brown.
So yes. So if you can get Jordan Addison, I would take that. That's just a deal sweetener.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I lost track. I think it's me. I'll just stick with the Cardinals here. And go Marvin Harrison Jr. as my first guy to trade away. And, this is not – I don't want to sound overly critical of Marvin Harrison. Hey, we appreciate you being here, buddy. Don't want to sound overly critical of Marvin Harrison Jr. and his start this year. But I just think this is a classic, he is the wide receiver 15. He hasn't had a bye week. This is classic. That production has, number one, not matched the ride, and number two, does not match what I think will happen down the stretch the rest of the season. He is the wide receiver 15, hasn't had the bye. He did leave a game pretty early, and he scored, I think, 0 points in that game. But this is a guy who his role, you mentioned them needing an alpha. His role has been almost exclusively down the field, deep stuff, which is fine and can lead to big days, and it has led to big days. It's led to, again, a top 20 total season for him so far this year. He's leading all rookies in touchdowns right now, touchdown receptions, but he's been very inconsistent too. He's had, I think, 5 games of 5 or fewer points. If you look at just his averages, he's averaging 10 points per game, which is the wide receiver 35 on the season just by averages. So, this is a guy that's getting just 5 targets a game in his last 5 games, 23% target share on the season. You heard me earlier. Trey McBride, 26%. So he is the number 1 target. I do not expect that to change. I looked at rest of season ranks. Devonta Smith is behind him. I would rather have Devonta Smith in a heartbeat, I think, down the stretch this season. Devonta Smith, 26% target share, 20% targets per route run, over 6 targets per game. The volume's better. The offense has been better. Kyler's been good this year, but the Eagles have been more consistent, more reliable. They've only really had 1 bad week offensively, and I don't even know if Devonta Smith was playing in that game. I know A.J. Brown was not playing in that game. So I just feel better about him down the stretch than a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. But to me, this is you can sell a guy who is top 20, but really has been more like a wide receiver 3 this year and just what he's done on a per game basis. But you can sell him for a pretty high end, mid to high end wide receiver 2 type of guy, whether it's Devonta Smith or somebody else you like in that range. And I'm just all in on doing that. Despite, I will acknowledge, could this blow up in my face if he does come out of the bye and take a step, his role takes a step? Absolutely. He's been a good player this year. He's been one of the best receivers against press coverage in the NFL. If you just look at targets per route run, he's first, he's second in first downs per route run, and 4th in yards per route run against press coverage. Good player, good season, but you can get a good value for him right now. I just don't think he's worth it right now.
Yeah, this is one of those players where you go to the other person, you tell them don't overthink it. He's the wide receiver 15.
Yep.
And then you get the trade done, and it's easy, and it's no salt on your wound. Jason Ortiz does have a pretty interesting scenario here. Mm-hmm. Looks like he traded Garrett Wilson and Cedric Tillman for Jaden Daniels, Devontae Adams, Marvin Harrison, asking if he won. Despite us telling you to trade for Marvin Harrison, I like that package you got back. I think Wilson and Adams, similar value. Tillman, still kind of a mystery box if we're going to keep the ride we're on with him. And Marvin Harrison, I would feel better about starting weekly. And then Jaden Daniels, he's had an insane season. Doesn't look like it's going to stop. So I think that's a good trade. I think you probably won that.
Yeah, and we talk about these types of deals, not necessarily 2 for 3, whatever, but these types of deals where you can finagle your way into an elite quarterback without sacrificing much just from your starting lineup. And I think this is what you did here. And those elite quarterbacks can be a big time difference maker in a win or go home scenario in the playoffs. It's very nice to feel very confident that, hey, I'm getting at least 18 points this week. And if my guy blows up, he could score 32 points and win me my week. That's just so valuable any week, obviously, but in the playoffs, it is a big difference to be able to start a guy like a Jalen Hurts, like a Jaden Daniels, like a Josh Allen, as opposed to a Kirk Cousins, who, yeah, he can give you that 30-point week. He can also score 4 points, and those guys just have not shown that type of floor, obviously, on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I'd agree.
He did have another trade, also traded Pollard and TJ Hawkinson, who he never started because he had Kittle, for CeeDee Lamb. I thought about putting CeeDee Lamb on my trade away. With that said, I still think the CeeDee Lamb side of this one as well, especially considering having Kittle on your roster. Hawkinson was probably a very late draft pick, if at all drafted in your league, depending on IR settings and things of that nature. So, yeah, I like what you did there too.
Yeah, CD did make my trade away, but again, you're giving up really fringe value for a player who still has top 5 skill set in the wide receiver core in the NFL.
One more question here, and then we'll hop back into our own list. 10-man PPR, trade James Conner, Terry McLaurin, and Najee Harris for Gibbs and Debo. His other wide receivers, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Cooper Kupp. He has Derrick Henry, Chase Brown, and Brian Robinson Jr. at running back. I know this is 10-man, but that team sounds incredibly stacked. So I definitely like trading 3 for 2. And I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, is going to be one of the preeminent league winners down the stretch this season.
Yeah, honestly, if you had given us your team first, I would have told you not to do this because I think Debo is close to a 0 for a while until we see more out of him. But
close to a 0.
No, I mean, close for a 0 as far as like compared to McLaurin, which is what we're doing here.
Yeah, but like, would you trade James Conner and Najee Harris for Jahmyr Gibbs?
Yes, and that's why. And with your wide receivers, I don't think it matters. Debo can sit on your bench till we see more from him, and then if he ends up popping like we've seen him do before, you have a really good flex option. So I would definitely do that.
Yeah. Okay. Next up for you, I guess go in the CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, we'll just go into CeeDee Lamb. There's not a lot to say here, to be completely honest with you, except that like the Dallas Cowboys are getting near shut it down territory.
They had like 43 more net pass yards than you and I did last week.
Yes. We got CeeDee Lamb saying he couldn't see the ball in the end zone because of the glass. Jerry Jones is on full tilt mode in the media.
There is nothing funnier than that. Number one, that's been a thing the whole time they've had the stadium, but there's nothing funnier than that kind of coming to a head this week. And then during the same week, Mike McCarthy has a shade in his press conference to block his eyes from the sun because Mike McCarthy needs to see in his press conference a lot more than CeeDee Lamb in the end zone trying to catch the ball.
Yes. And like CeeDee is a really good player and you can get a really good return for him still. I just think it's going to be a bumpy ride. He's going to have 20-point weeks where he just does it himself. But the Cooper Rush experience is not good. And the Eagles' pass defense is not great, but they held him significantly. And you just go down the line. Next is Trey Lance. If he were to get a start, he threw 4 interceptions in a preseason game. Like Trey Lance is still a project in the NFL. He's on his 5th year in the NFL. It's not a good passing environment. It wasn't great with Dak, and it only goes downhill. I would be surprised to see McCarthy and company retained, although it's Jerry World, so anything could happen. And CD is just going to be an elite guy. You're going to trade for a secondary option. You're not going to feel great about it, but you're going to get points where they matter, when they matter, and you cannot rely on CD to do that. I would say he still has wide receiver 2 appeal, but he's boom or bust wide receiver 2 appeal going forward.
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that because I wanted to kind of hold your feet to the fire because I don't disagree with wanting to trade him away. I'm just not sure what kind of value you're going to get for him if it really is going to be worth it. Because you said it, he is going to have weeks where he has 11 catches for 71 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, inefficient, it's ugly, but he had a big day because he's awesome. I think if you're trying to trade him away, you're probably pointing back to the last time Cooper Rush was the quarterback and be like, hey, I know it's not Dak, but it can still be fine. Now, the deeper context to that is this is not the same Cowboys team. This is not the same Cowboys offense, not even close to what that team was that Cooper Rush walked into and went, I think, 4-1, 5-1 as
his
a
only
starter.
loss was to the Eagles. He's only lost in his NFL career to the Eagles, in fact.
Yeah. And, well, oh, yeah, that's true. He lost the Eagles last week. Fair point. But, like, looking at this, wide receiver 20, I'm just looking like Marvin Harrison Jr. is 18. I'm not trading him for Marvin Harrison Jr. T. Higgins, 19. Bless your heart, son. Get those soft tissues figured out, and maybe we can talk. But until then, no. Zay Flowers, 17. I would definitely rather have Zay Flowers. Obviously, I'm going up instead of down. We'll go down now. Like DeAndre Hopkins, 21. I think I'd still rather have CeeDee Lamb. Darnell Mooney, 22. I'd definitely rather have CeeDee Lamb. I understand. This, like Darnold, it kind of feels like I talked about Darnell Mooney last week. It's been awesome what he's done this year. It kind of feels like, they can't keep getting away with this. Like we just talked about that with the Chiefs over the weekend, blocking the field goal. That's kind of how I feel about Darnell Mooney's season. Like there's just no way this is going to quite continue as good as it's been this year for as good as he's been.
I wonder if you could get him for Drake London.
Get
trade CD for Drake London.
I would be surprised if someone's giving up Drake London for CeeDee Lamb. But, in the more casual leagues where name value is more important than actually what's happening in some instances, maybe.
Yeah. I think you should shop him aggressively. And it might be 11 different owners you shop him to till you find a good package. And this is going to be one of those ones where you're probably doing a 2-for-1 for CD and you're just building a roster that's more reliable. For example,
last receiver name I wanted to mention real quick, and then you can go ahead because you talked about him earlier. Mike Evans. Would you rather have Mike Evans rest of season or CeeDee Lamb?
Mike Evans.
Mike Evans is ranked 23rd, so below him on this list.
I would say this is potentially where I would look into getting a Trey McBride or a George Kittle plus a running back. I mean, look, just picking both of your trade for guys, could you do Jalen Warren, George Kittle for CeeDee Lamb?
I mean, yeah, I think that could probably get done in some leagues.
Yeah. So I think it will take some shopping. Even straight up, CeeDee Lamb for Jaden Daniels, if that owner has 2 quarterbacks, that's another thing I would look at. It's at this point in the season, it's really about insulating your roster from having bad weeks because now we have enough data on the NFL to know what players are consistent and what players aren't. And I don't think the ride with CDs is going to be consistent at all.
Tyrone Tracy is the RB19. CeeDee Lamb is the wide receiver 20. I like there's a world where you could trade for CeeDee Lamb and give up Tyrone Tracy, and that just blows my September 13th mind on November 13th.
That is insane. Just remember, we do nothing in July, but this July we're going to know everything.
That's right. Come back to us this July. We'll have it. I promise. All right. My next guy is Alvin Kamara. And, Dalton, I know you'll be happy about this as the resident Alvin Kamara hater on this podcast. I take no pleasure in being the one that has to bring Alvin Kamara to the table here. But I did not realize what was happening with Alvin Kamara this year until I took a closer look. He's on pace for 370 touches this year.
That's a lot of touches.
What his career high? Just if you had the guess.
Well, I know for 3 seasons in a row it was 290. 299?
What the thing that was 3 seasons in a row is his first 3 years he had exactly 81 receptions.
Oh, okay, that's what it was.
His career high in touches is 287. Again, he's on pace for 370 touches. And I hate that feels like kind of the crux of my argument with this. But it's like, hey, man, this guy's 29. He's about ready to have almost 100 more touches if he stays healthy than he's ever had. in a season, I just kind of want to get out while he's the RB2. And I'm not saying like he's the RB10 rest of season. I think on Fantasy Pros, I think he'll still be pretty good probably if he stays healthy. But that just makes me incredibly uncomfortable knowing what he's on pace for and what he's done as an elite player. Obviously, he still is an elite player, a very good player. You watch him; he still has all of the Alvin Kamara stuff that makes him great. Would be nice for the sake of this list if he would have caught that touchdown and taken it 50 yards and boost his value even more.
Hey, that's a good argument, though. You go to the last week, he had 11 more points he left on the field.
That is very true, and everybody knows it. You see, Kamara said that's the lamest thing he's ever done on a football field.
Oh
I thought that was funny. But it's the RB2 right now in total points, RB4 in points per game, and like I just look, he's RB10 in rest of season ranks on Fantasy Pros. Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, James Cook, all behind him. I take all three of those guys over Alvin Kamara rest of season. I mean, I'm worried about the volume. I am worried about the offense that no Shaheed. Maybe no Olave rest of season. He's at least on IR for now. So no Olave for a large chunk of the rest of the fantasy season. I don't think MVS is going to go 3 for 130 and 2. Probably again. Maybe ever again. Certainly not again this year, probably. And he definitely won't do anything like that on a consistent basis. They're going to have to run him into the ground probably for him to keep producing at the RB1 price tag that he's at right now. And I think I'd rather get out, bet on another guy who I like a lot at the position and hope it works out.
Yeah. And one, he's not surviving on efficiency. He's surviving on his touch volume, which is how he's producing a lot of these.
Number one in the NFL in touches right now.
Yes. Number two here, and this is probably just an understated fact. News came out over the weekend that Kendre Miller should not be on IR. In fact, It sounds like Dennis Allen had a personal vendetta against Kendre Miller, which we all speculated jokingly.
It's so funny that his parting shot as he's getting fired is he's put Kendre Miller wrongly on the IR for a month because he hates him.
So Miller has 2 more weeks on IR. I don't think there's another running back in this room they want to give touches to until Miller's back. Mm-hmm. But I would be really concerned if I'm a Alvin Kamara owner and keeping him to watch Kendre Miller come back and get 14 touches a game and take Kamara down 7 or 8.
Even if it's 8 touches a game, that's way more because you have the Taysom Hill of it all still. And this is a team who they're already out of it. They're definitely going to be out of it by the time Kendre Miller gets back. So that they have every incentive, you would think, to at least get that guy on the field. So that is at least a small factor. That's a good point.
So I agree with you. It just doesn't seem like sustainable production because it's very inefficient on a team that doesn't like. If he was very inefficient, but they were winning games, it would be a different story here. But they're not winning games. He's being incredibly inefficient. And at some point, you do want to take a look at what else you have on this roster. So you go in to the offseason knowing what you need to build.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Real quick, I have Pacheco and Hunt, and I'm not sure what to do. Should I trade them or should I keep them? Man, that is an interesting question. We've talked about this a little bit. And I think Dalton and I are both kind of in agreement that I think this will probably be a pretty even split between these two when Pacheco is back. It sounds like not this week, but next week. How long it takes Pacheco to get eased in, I don't really know. It does kind of seem like Pacheco is a guy that he doesn't really ease in. He just jumps right into whatever his role is going to be. Honestly, I think you're probably just stuck holding both guys. I think the sell window for Kareem Hunt is probably come and gone now that Pacheco is coming off IR. If someone wants to pay you for Pacheco what his draft price was, like close to RB1, I'd be fine doing it. But I'm not looking to sell Pacheco at like low-end RB2 value because there is still potential for more if he does come in and take a 65% of this workload. I do still think Kareem Hunt, probably the short yardage guy that I prefer personally as a Chiefs fan. So, I mean, that's a factor too, but I think you're probably just stuck with both of them right now.
Yeah, unless you package them as package field and say you get the Chiefs RB1 for the rest of the season. But I think you're better off holding them and seeing what happens. Because let's just say Pacheco comes back, he's fully healthy, and he's doing 90% of the work. And he's also getting the touches we're seeing from Kareem Hunt at like 25. a game, and he's also better than Kareem Hunt at generating explosives, that's a really valuable, likely RB1 player for your team. If not, you've gotten this far along with those two. But I just don't think, even if you package them together, anybody's going to give you a good value for it. And you're going to have a lot of really frustrating trade talks where people are offering you like Devin Singletary and Tyrone Tracy, or Jordan Mason and Michael Floyd. Like, it's just going to be like, well, one guy's injured and one guy's old, and I don't want either of them.
You say Michael Floyd?
The wide receiver 2 for the Cardinals.
Michael Wilson. Michael Floyd was the wide receiver 2 for the Cardinals about a decade ago.
lot of ball knowledge in here.
Okay, Dalton. Are we down to your last one?
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear it.
It brings me no joy to put this player on this list. But he needs to be talked about, and he needs to be shelved for a while.
Oh.
It's Brian Thomas Jr.
Oh, that's got to hurt.
It hurts a lot. There are a couple things going on here. One, I don't think he's healthy. Watched the last 2 games. Went back and watched every snap. Nowhere near as explosive. He's not cutting into his routes as well. He's not getting separation on deep routes. It's not there. And it's very obvious if you just box score watch. Over the last 2 games, he has 4 targets. This offense is going to trot out Mac Jones what could be the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And Mac Jones does not have – Mac Jones was a fine quarterback at some points. What he has is a good short and quick game. Brian Thomas is an okay intermediate and short game winner, but that's not where he excels. He excels in the long game, and him and Wilson were developing a really good connection. I don't know if that's going to exist with Mac Jones.
Trevor Lawrence, man. You're all over the place with the Wilsons right now.
Trevor Lawrence. I don't think that's going to exist with Mac Jones. I don't have faith that this offense is being coached effectively throughout the entire season.
Not.
I thought the answer for a long time was more Brian Thomas Jr., but his injury, I think, is really hampering him, and he's fighting through it. Very admirable, but it's not resulting in a player you can start reliably. And when you go to trade him, it's going to be one of those terrible feelings where you're not trading him for a high value outcome. You're getting a mid, at best, wide receiver 2 for Brian Thomas Jr. at this point, when we know Brian Thomas Jr. has wide receiver 1 painted on him.
Yeah, so right now he is on Fantasy Pros wide receiver 30 rest of season.
Yeah, so you're looking in Jawan Jennings is a player I'd do straight up for him at this point.
Well, look, he's right next to wide receiver 31, a guy who I wrote down as an honorable mention, former Jaguar Calvin Ridley. I would rather have Calvin Ridley down the stretch.
I wasn't even going to mention Ridley because he's had such a good last couple of weeks, but yeah. I would do Ridley for Brian Thomas Jr. straight up.
Here's the thing with Ridley is he still has the Titan stink and the Will Levis stink, and he himself is just inconsistent. So I think you could probably trade for him, and the person trading him is like, oh, he blew up twice. This is my chance. Get him off my team. Whereas in reality, yeah, he's going to still be up and down because that's just Calvin Ridley since, the last couple of years since he's come back. But they have the third easiest wide receiver schedule down the stretch. This season, he has a 30% targets per route run rate and 2 top 3 finishes since DeAndre Hopkins got traded. The top 3 finishes thing, obviously not sustainable, but the volume without D-Hop, I think that is very sustainable for Calvin Ridley.
Another one I had, fellow draft class attendee, Glad McConkey. It's not pretty. I'm not going to pretend like you can go and sell him for a high MP, but he doesn't need to be on your roster. I don't think there's going to be a world where he comes back and him and Mac Jones save your team. But there's
the Patriots tried that. It went poorly for the Mac Jones.
There's enough shiny new player, looked really good for a good part of the season so far, that there's still a lot of hype you can generate around him in your trade discussions that you need to do, and you need to get rid of him.
Yeah, so a guy that I think you need to get rid of right now is Tony Pollard. You think back, I think it's time before people really notice what happened last week, just quietly put him on the market, sell him as that fringe RB1 that he's been. the whole season and hope people don't look too deep at the box score or watch the game for that matter. Tajay Spears played 46% of the snaps last week. That was a season high. Tony Pollard played 54%. It was the most snaps that Tajay Spears had played all season. His second most, his second most were in week 1. I don't want to sound like, in this case and in the Jaylen Warren case, I'm overreacting to just the last thing I saw. Because there's other situations like, I think J.K. Dobbins may be in for a little bit of a downgrade with Gus Edwards. I think the people who are like fire selling J.K. Dobbins because of that are going a little bit overboard because I don't think Gus Edwards is a very good player. I think Tajay Spears, a very good player. I think Jaylen Warren, very good player. Like, those are the differences in those situations. Both Warren and Spears have had similar seasons to where Spears, I don't think, started out hurt before the season, but he got hurt immediately and has just had an uneven season. But he's back out, I'm trying to remember, was it out of the bye week? Have they had their bye week? No, I can't remember. But he just had his most involved game, his second highest scoring game of the season. And Tony Pollard has, kind of like Alvin Kamara, been the product of a ton of volume in Tennessee. He's 8th in the NFL in touches. I would bet very strongly he's going to fall a pretty long ways off of that down the stretch this season. I'm not even saying Tajay Spears is taking over this backfield, but if this is close to a 50-50 in touches and snaps, which is what it was, I think it was Pollard had 2 more routes run and 2 more carries than Tajay Spears last week. His 56% are running back rush share, the lowest of the season. If that's what we get going forward, which I think that is what the skill of Tajay Spears calls for. I think it calls for that kind of split. If that's what we get, then Tony Pollard is not going to live up to the value you think he has right now.
Yeah. Let's not forget Tajay Spears is the only running back in Tennessee history to take a significant chunk of Derrick Henry's snap share, who we can probably confidently say still has it, probably still had it last year.
Yeah.
And in that time was highly effective as a runner. Still showed that he was highly effective as a runner. He had I think it was 3rd and 13, and he had a run that he converted for 20 yards. That looked really good. I'm still very much a believer in Tajay Spears. And just remember, there are people every year who become league winners that you weren't even considering. And Tajay Spears has that written on him. Think Rashad Penny. They're not the same type of player, but Rashad Penny was a dead scratch for 12 straight weeks in a row and then was a fantasy championship winner. Same thing with Damian Harris for the Patriots one year. Nothing, and then suddenly he comes out of the gate and he's winning you leagues.
Yeah. No, I just think I'm not even sure if that could happen for Spears, but even if it doesn't, I just think the fact that he seems like he is now around and established himself as a real part of this backfield is a big problem for Tony Pollard in a bad offense that is not going to be moving the ball consistently. And he really was living off of mega volume to get to where he's at right now.
Yeah.
All right, Dalton, anything else before we hop out of here?
That'll do it. Let's what's the Thursday night game?
It is Eagles and Commanders. So a very good 2 weeks in a row of great
NFL
Thursday.
Really up their product on Thursdays.
Yeah, product is dying. Gotta figure it out somehow. That is going to do it for episode 161 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube at Half Point Per Podcast. We will answer every question we get in the chat, all of those things in the show notes as well. We're available anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple. Leave us a 5-star review, and we will talk to you again next week.